This video is brought to you by LogRocket, the front-end performance monitor that records videos of user sessions along with logs and network data, surfacing problems and revealing the root cause of every bug. Try it today at logrocket.com/YT.
Hello and welcome to this video where I'm going to be showing you how you can go from zero to hero in Jest. So what is Jest? Jest is just a JavaScript testing framework that's actively maintained by Facebook, and today you'll find a lot of React, TypeScript, Node.js, Angular, Vue developers using Jest to test their code. Jest is actively used as well by many people within the community, but big companies, you'll find big companies like Facebook, Twitter, Spotify, Instagram, Airbnb, and many other companies, even mid-tier, small-tier companies using Jest for how easy it is to test your code. I use Jest a lot to test React code, and I generally house this alongside React testing library, and I find that works really well. But in this particular video, I'm just going to be showing you how you can basically speed up your Jest learning within the time, I guess, it takes you to watch and go through this video. So let's basically begin. I'm going to be showing you quite a lot in this video, and it's going to be going over some of the simple stuff and some of the more advanced stuff like mocking, spying. But to start out with, I have this initial basic setup. This is basically a Create React app that has a data.json file. Within this file, you'll see that we have an array of 4 pizzas. And an array of 4 pizzas, but these arrays are obviously objects, as you can tell. We've got a few properties in here like ID, name, image, description, price. And we're going to be using this to test basically the throughput of our expectations, our lengths, our properties, everything you can imagine we're going to be testing. So we're going to be going quite deep in terms of testing every particular piece of this object that we have within this array. So we've got 4 of these and we're going to be testing them individually. So I'll show you how to do that as well. So if you just want to take a quick snapshot of this, maybe fill it out with your own implementation, because it's not very specific as to what we're going to be doing. We're just using this as a data point to show how we can use Jest. We're not going to be looking at stuff like coverage today, because I don't feel that it's very relevant to up your knowledge. I'm trying to give you a quick crash course in Jest. So to begin, what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to import this file. So this is a pizza file, I'm going to call it. I'm just going to import it simply like that. Next, what we're going to be doing is where I want to show you some of the good things in Jest and some of the bad things in Jest. At the start of the React community in testing, we found that a lot of people were snapshot testing UI components, and it wasn't very necessarily a good thing to do. So that's, I guess, the community's kind of moved away from that. But I want to show you how we can use a snapshot. And snapshot testing is very good when it comes to stuff like GraphQL, where we can look at the input and we can get the output. So if you're more interested in that, have a look at like black box testing or integration testing in GraphQL. There's some really good examples. But let me show you how you can snapshot test this particular JSON file, because in this case, it kind of works. We want to see what the data is in a JSON file, and we want to make sure that over time, if someone is using something like Circle CI or Team City, that if we don't expect this data file to change, it will fail the test and it will fail the build, which is good for us as developers. So let's jump in. Let's start out with a basic test statement. So I'll change this to test. And what we're going to do, we're just going to name this. And when you're naming your tests here, like you'll see, it's like a function. We're just passing something in. We're passing in a name and then a callback function. We're just going to say the pizza data is correct. And when you run this I'll run this shortly in here, and this is ZSH up on the left. You'll see that this particular title comes through, so we can see if it passes or fails, which is really helpful. So we're going to be using here basic expectations, and to do a snapshot, all you have to do is we're just going to say expect pizzas. That's our JSON file to match snapshot. And when you do this, basically what it's going to do, it's going to create a folder in here called snapshots. And then if you change your data.json file and run the tests, it's going to break. And that's good because then we know, something's changed. We need to go look at that. So let's go ahead and just run this. So we'll say yarn test. I'm just going to make sure, let's pull this aside, we have no coverage, I'll pull that. So it's running now, it should create the snapshot for us, and then we can start checking against. So there we are, we've got one snapshot written, that's perfect, and we can take a look at that snapshot. And here we are, we've got the array of objects, and it's basically using, well, our title that we've given it. And well, you know what, let's take a look at this. Let's take a look. So if I go into data.json now, so we've seen there on the left we have a passing test, and I just change this ID to 5, and I rerun the test. This should fail now. There we are. So what it's seeing here is the snapshot has changed, and basically to update the snapshot, if you're using interactive testing, you can just rerun the snapshot. If you're like me and you're fairly lazy, I just basically delete the snapshot, rerun it, and then it'll pass the test. What we're going to have to do now that there you are, look, it's passed the test, is we're going to have to put that back to 3, come back in here, delete that snapshot, rerun this. There we go. Perfect, so it's written the snapshot. So now let's do another expectation. An expectation is just saying, you can just do like expect 1 to equal 1. And we can run that. And I generally keep ZSH or a terminal up on the left just to see if we've got any failures. I only basically use it as a reference. Generally what I will do is I'll have my code terminal, and then say VS Code, and then I'll have the coverage once I've written all the stuff that I'm expecting. So let's go set expect pizzas to have a length 4. And we basically said there, do we have an array with 4 objects inside? We do. If that comes back as false, then we'll see it in the terminal. I don't expect it to come back as false because we've just had a look in that data.json file and we see that there's 4 objects in there. So next let's do pizzas.map, and we'll do pizza.name. So we're going to basically get all the pizza names here, and we're going to say we want to test that these pizza names equal what we've got in the data.json file. So for a bit of brevity, let me just copy that. And the next one is New York pizza, which is always a good choice. And the next one after that is Sicilian pizza. I knew if I tried typing them out myself, I probably would have got a failing test, but let's just take a look. So that should hopefully pass. Perfect, that's perfect. So now let's take a look at how we can test each object within that array. And we want to check for the properties. So a good way to do this, you can use, I believe it's .each, maybe just matching for .each. I found that quite complex because you have to give it an array of your values and then expectations. In here I'm just going to use a standard loop. So you'll see here I've got options in VS Code for a basic for loop, for each loop, a for in loop, and a for of loop. I'm just going to go with the basic for loop here. I'm just going to set I for the index, and I'm going to change this to pizzas.length, and then we're going to do I plus equals 1. Just check that down, and now let me just scroll a bit so you can see this better. Then we're going to say we're going to write a test here. I'll change this to test again. Generally, if you've got a test suite, so you've got describe, and then inside that describe, I use it. If I'm just running singular tests, one after the other, I'll use test. So what we're going to say here is, let me get some template strings, please. And then we'll say pizza, and we'll say the iteration, which is going to be I, should have properties ID, name, image, description, price. And it doesn't really matter how long your test title is, because I prefer them to be longer than shorter, because the person who's looking at it will get a better indication as to what's going on. So we can test each property now in here. So we'll start looking for the ID, the name, the image, description, and price. Granted, we've got some backup on the snapshot, so if anything changes, but I want to show you how you can use both ways, essentially. So I kind of prefer this way as opposed to the snapshot, because then I'm not pushing most stuff up to Git. But either way works. So we'll say pizzas, and we'll say I, and we'll say to have property ID, and we'll just copy that, and we'll change this to name, image, description, and price. And just to check that this is working, we can just put in crazy price in there. So we should get a failing test, which is good. Let's pull this over. There we are. Perfect. So it's received the value description. Crazy price does not exist, pretty much. So it's always good to put in something that you don't expect, just to make sure your test isn't passing for some weird reason. But that's how you test the properties, by looping over each particular item within the array. So now we're going to get on to mocking. So what exactly is mocking? Well, the way I first looked at mocking when I started testing is, you know how you've got like a joker, or in a pack of cards you've got a joker or a I think a Jesper is called, I can't quite remember, but you know how they mock people? Well, you have to, and they'll make a joke, maybe how you sound or how you walk or how you look, you know, something really silly. That's how you have to think about mocking. So mocks are known as essentially spies, that's what they're known as, or something that's mimicking something. So instead of hitting Axios, for example, we don't want to be pulling in the entire Axios library and making it hit the actual remote URL that we're using for our API. We're going to mimic that, and essentially, in the same words, we're going to mock it and just give us a fake, maybe an object or function, whatever it may be. We're going to be mimicking the behavior. So we're not going to be directly hitting at an endpoint. In the case of Axios, we're going to be indirectly hitting some other piece of code that we've created. And it's much, much better than testing the output, because what happens if you've got like a build going through TeamCity or Circle CI and trying to hit a live endpoint, and you know you're running that test multiple times, and it's costing you, maybe you're a small company, it's costing you money. There's no need to do that. And plus, what happens if it goes down? It'll break all the builds. So it's always better to have a fixture or a mock. So let's look how we can use some basic mocking. Let's go down here and we'll just say, again, we'll go in and we'll say test, and for the title we're going to say mock implementation of a basic function. So we can start off with the basics here. We'll say mock, give that as const, and we'll just say jest.fn, and I'll get to that shortly, and we will return I am a mock function. So let's go ahead and log that out. What does mock give us? So run that test. And there we are. So we get a lot of helper methods here. So we can, you know, mock reset, restore, return value once, implementation once. So this is stuff we're going to be looking at, which is really useful. And you'll generally find you'll use it a lot if you're working at a company or on a project, or just generally using React in your testing code. So let's say expect the mock, calling my mock function to be, we're going to use the to be. And there's also like to be truth here, to be false here, to contain, and a bunch of other helper methods that we can use and validate against. And there's some subtle differences, so definitely check out the Jest documentation. This website is jest.js.io. It's very helpful. So we'll say I am a mock function. And what's happening here is basically we're going to be calling this mock here, we're going to be passing something in. So calling my mock function, and we're going to say is the return output I am a mock function, and that's all it is. So we'll do the same again. We'll say expect mock to have been called with, even though we're not been doing anything with this here, we're just going to grab it and we're going to see that the function got called with this particular argument that got passed in. So let's go ahead and see if this works. Pull this over. Oh, it doesn't work. So there's a good a mistake from me here. So we expected I am a mock function, and we received I am a mock function. So my grammar on this one's not particularly great. I'm saying I am mock function. So let's go ahead and change this. I'm a mock function. I'm a mock function. Where are we looking here? To be I am a mock function. Okay, I am a mock function. Okay, I see. So let's pull this back over here. So saying here I am a mock function. Let's put this. To me that looks exactly the same. No, it doesn't. I cannot see the A. So perfect. Okay, that grammar's better, and if we rerun that test, we should get a passing test. Perfect. And you see how we've got all these titles coming down now, and we've got the loop going as well, which is great. So we've got 5 different tests going on here. And we're starting to build some real confidence in this data file that we're testing. It's not just a data file here. We can apply this to components, we can apply this to classes, whatever it may be. The stuff you're learning here, like testing objects, testing arrays, this is the real fundamental stuff, and testing how to mock is very, very important. So moving on, there's a difference here. So you'll see that you'll use probably mock return value quite a lot. You'll see mock implementation quite a lot. And I want to start off with how we can use mock return value. So if I just move that up a bit, and for brevity, let's go ahead and just delete this, and we'll change this one to mock return value of a function one time. So what does that mean? So you can mock the return value as many times as you like, but in this case we're just going to mock it the one time, and I'll show you some good examples right now. So if we just create another mock function again, and if we do mock return value once, so we're just going to say, okay, when someone calls this the one time, give us this output. If you call it the second time, there's nothing that's going to get returned that we expect, right? Maybe it comes back with undefined. So let's just say hello. And the good thing about getting all these helper methods on this mock constructor function here that we've got up here is that we can chain these. So we can do this twice. So if I wanted to just put another one there, I can just put hello there, save that, and we can do that twice. How great is that? So now if I call this twice, this function, I can do expect mock to have been called times 2. So that's just saying, is the function being called 2 times? If it has, passed the test. If it's been called 3 times, failure. So what we're going to do next is we're going to say mock hello, and we're going to pass in there, and we're going to pass in Steve. So you can see I get kind of crazy with this. You can pass in as many arguments as you like, and we're just going to be testing the stuff that's coming out. So here, let's go expect mock to have been called with. So if you're passing in a user on a live website and you're passing in some important details, we can test that the user is passing in, say, their first, or an email address and some sort of password. We can, just give some dummy data for those two parts, but we want to make sure that the output, does it go hit a session, remote server, where we can see if there's a session already existing, so with that user's products in the basket, something along those lines. So here we can say hello there, Steve. So what's going on here? Basically, we're calling the function twice here. We're going to expect it's been called twice, and then we're going to call it with 3 different arguments, and we're going to make sure that it's been called with these 3 arguments. And we can see that we're going to get a failure here because I've given it an exclamation mark, and that's good because it's always good to get a fail in test and see why. Perfect. So we get a number of calls here, 3. So mock return value of a function one time has failed, which is this one here. And if we get rid of that there, rerun this test, we should get a passing test suite. Perfect. So we're definitely building some confidence around the stuff we can use now. So let's go ahead and do just a singular one. So we'll just say mock Steve. Expect mock to have been last called with Steve. And again, that should pass. I'm pretty confident that'll pass. I'll start rerunning the tests as we get deeper in. You don't want to write a bunch of tests and not run them, because you may run into an issue where you're like, wow, I've got 3 out of 5 failing tests. So let's go ahead and create another test here. Let's move that up a bit. And this particular test, I'm going to show you how to use mock implementation of a function. So if we go ahead and do mock again, we'll do jest.function dot, because we got all those helper methods on there, and we saw we had mock implementation. Well, what we can do, we can just pass the return value of a function, and I'll say United Kingdom, and that's going to get returned. So if I say expect mock location to be United Kingdom. So if we pass in location, it's going to give us United Kingdom. The locations are relevant in this case because we're always going to get United Kingdom back. But you can see how you can apply this to some real production or just code that you enjoy working on. So expect mock to have been called with location. So you see how with the mock return value, we're basically just giving it a return value immediately, and with the implementation, we're saying here's a function, go ahead. So we've got like an anonymous function going on here saying, yeah, go ahead, just the implementation is basically a callback function in this case, and return United Kingdom. So if I go ahead and save that. So in this case, I think it's probably a good idea now to run the test, because we've written another one and we want to make sure it passes. And there we are. So it's saying here, mock implementation is not a function. Now, I don't know if this is me not being able to spell, but let's try that one more time. Let's see. Oh, it's not. And the reason for that is because I didn't call the function. So I have more confidence in my spelling now as opposed to figuring out Jest. Nevertheless, let's move on. That one works perfectly. The next one we're going to be looking at is how we can spy on a single function of an imported module. So if you've got, say, Axios, for example, imported, and you've got some test that you want to run it against, well, you'll generally find you'll have like .get, .post, and you don't want to be using the actual implementation, so you can mock those out. So in this example, I'm going to be showing you how you can spy on this. So if you've got, say, a class as well, if you've got a class and you have an object in there, not an object, a method in there that you want to spy on, it's much easier to have a look at the actual implementation. One key factor is with spying that by default you will get the original function that gets called. So if you're using .get in Axios, it's going to use the actual implementation. So let's say spying using original implementation, and then we'll say const pizza, and we'll have a name, and we'll use the argument name n here. We'll say pizza name, and then we'll just say n. So we're just going to basically pass in n, and it's just going to print us out pizza name with whatever we passed in. Put that there. Then we're going to say spy equals jest.spy on. So now we're going to pass in this pizza object, and then we're going to say go look at the name. And if you had, for example, another one here like, I don't know, pizza. How old is the pizza? Well, you could pass in name, age here as well if you wish. Not at the same time, but differently. So now we've got the spy. We can say expect pizza.name cheese to be pizza name cheese, because we're passing it in. It's just going to basically put it in where these red brackets are, and that should pass. And then we can say expect spy to have been called with cheese, and I'm pretty confident that should pass, but again, we've written a new test, so let's go ahead and just check it. Let's see, there we are, that passes perfectly. So next, let's look at how we can get into the juiciness of spy, because spy is very, very useful. And sometimes you want to take in, like I said earlier, maybe an imported module and you just want to change one of the functions, or whether it be a class or whatever it may be. But sometimes you don't want the actual implementation. So that's where we use mock implementation. So you can see how all this stuff ties together, right? You've got all these assertions like checking that it's been called with to be. Then you have the mock implementation, the mock return value. There's a bunch of useful stuff. So let's actually, you know what, we can pretty much just copy this one because there's not that much to change. So we'll say spying using, let's get rid of original, mock implementation, and then we'll keep the pizza name here. Then we'll say spy on, spy name, that looks good. And at this point, this is where we need to change that implementation. So we're going to say mock implementation. I'm going to take the pizza name because it's pretty much the same. And we'll say crazy pizza. And let's pull it up a bit. And then we'll say expect pizza name cheese to be, well, now to get a passing test, we need to put crazy pizza in there. Then we'll say expect spy dot to have been called with. We can get rid of that. Let's just see if that works. Let's go ahead. Perfect, that one works. So let me pull that back over there. So we've mocked the implementation, we've done an expect. So what happens if you want to use a method in there, for example, that comes after the spy, or you want to use, well, not comes after the spy, sorry, if you want to use this particular name method, but you only needed to mock it the one time? Well, you can restore. So we're going to say mock restore, and we're going to put it back to its original implementation. And then we can make sure this works by doing expect pizza.name cheese to be pizza name cheese, and we can test that works. Let's run that test, and it works perfectly. Brilliant. So we're making some real progress here. We've looked at mock implementation, mock return value, spying. We've even looked at mapping over, doing a for loop over each particular object in the array. You can see how Jest is really, really powerful, and it's very, very easy. And I know I'm saying it's easy because I've used it, but when you look at other testing frameworks, some of them are really confusing. Jest gives you all the nice names to use, like to be. There's no like you're seeing many. I know in Jest you can do this, where you can do like mock dot something dot expect dot to be dot object. And it's just much nicer to be like to be, you know. So yeah, Jest is nice, and I know it says it's easy, but it'll become easier and easier and easier as you go on and keep writing code. That's all it is. There's nothing special here. It's just muscle memory and going over and doing it time and time again. That's all it is. So next, anyhow, let's take a look at another test, obviously, but this one is going to be a bit different. So I'll put this one to, because we've looked at some of the juicy stuff like mocking, spying. Let's say pizza returns New York last. And what does that mean? Well, let's go ahead and access the pizzas array. So we're going to get the first pizza out. We're going to get 4 pizzas. Sounds like a good party. Actually, 4's probably too many. Let's just go with 3. And we'll do 1, 2. And then what we're going to do here is going to say pizza equals jest.function. We're going to use that jest.function again. You'll find yourself using that a lot. And we'll say current pizza.name. So what is this doing exactly? Well, we're passing in an object to this jest.function, and it's just going to take out the name property, which as you see right there. So we should hopefully, if we pass in pizza1, we pass in pizza1 to this function, we should get Chicago pizza, I believe. Yes. The next one you'll get the Neapolitan pizza, I think. And after that, my favorite pizza, the New York slice. New York slice pizza. So how can we test this? Well, let's go ahead and say expect pizza to have last returned with New York pizza. So we're calling the mock function 3 times. The first value is Chicago, then Neapolitan, and then the last one will be New York pizza. So let's test that works. Let's go ahead and have a look. Perfect. So there's many different ways to test this, but we're pretty much testing as much as possible here through the JSON file, and again looking at how you'll find you're using arrays and objects and that sort of stuff quite a lot with, say, React, Vue, basic JavaScript, TypeScript, whatever it may be, and implementing the stuff you're learning here into real world data is very much just a switch of it's not even a switch of mindset, it's just a switch of, okay, we're not thinking about pizzas, we're thinking about products. Even though pizza is a product and it's one of the best products, but that's what we're thinking about. So let's go ahead and do some data matching, which is going to be good. So me being lazy, I will just copy that. So we've got an empty test here, and we're going to say pizza data has New York pizza and matches as an object. So as mentioned, there's many ways to test stuff. So let me go ahead and get that New York pizza. Go back here and I'll say New York pizza. Save that, perfect. And then down here we're just going to say expect pizzas to, which is the second item in the array. So we've got 0, 1, 2. to match object New York Pizza. So we're testing the data file against our, basically our, you could call it a fixture. It's a fixture really, what we've put together. We want to expect that's the same. So let's go ahead and run that to make sure nothing has broke. We've got 11 passing at the minute. I expect there should be 12. Perfect, there we are. Brilliant. So next what we want to do, we want to start looking at some of the stuff that you run into when you're making calls to, say, backend services, or you're making some sort of Axios calls. You'll find Axios quite a lot within like React. I generally use GraphQL, but I also a lot of the time use Axios. Both have their advantages and disadvantages. Both are really good. But pick your poison in that case. So let's go ahead and create another test, and we'll just say test. And then what we want to do here, we want to look at how to use async await. So let's expect a promise to resolve. So any sort of async function, right, is going to return a promise. So you'll see here, I've got a test. I want to make this async. All I do, shove the async keyword right there, and then let's do const user equals get full name. So let's just create an object that has a function in here, a mock function, and we'll set promise.resolve. I'm going to resolve it to my name, Carl Hadwin, give that a save, and then the expectation has to wait, right? We don't want Jest to run over to the next test, so we're going to say await the expect user get full name Carl Hadwin, and we're going to say resolves, because that's what it's going to do, to be Carl Hadwin. And that's how you do an asynchronous test. Oh, it's nice, very nice. So let's run this, make sure it works. Beautiful. So it's so good. So next, let's take a look at a rejection. So let's say reject, expect a promise to reject. All we got to do here, we get the full name, and then we'll just say reject. But when you've got a reject, you'll see that I've got a little squiggly line here to say you should throw a reject. Okay, I'll do a new error. Something went terribly wrong. That does sound very, very bad. So if we pass in the full name, we don't really care about that, but we can just say to be something went terribly wrong. And let's run that, and that should be, well, pretty much coming to the end of all the testing. Oh, we have an error. Did I check? Oh, resolves. Okay, you see here? This is what happens when you copy and paste. It always seems to get me. Let me reject that. Let's see. Oh, we still do. Expect a promise to reject to be of undefined. Okay, so we have a new error with rejecting. We have a function. Await expect user.get full name Carl Hadwin rejects. That should now pass, hopefully. No, error. Something went terribly wrong. Oh, I've done 2B. You want to do to throw. Now that should work, because then it knows it's an error that's coming back, because it's thrown an error, and we're expecting an error, and that should pass. Fingers crossed. There we are. So I'm going to wrap up here. We've seen how we can extensively test, arrays, objects, data files by using some really cool stuff. So if we just go back to the beginning, we've imported a JSON file for just some mock data basically. We've done snapshot testing, we've checked the length, we've gone ahead and mapped over and made sure all the names exist. Then we did a nice little loop over the properties of each object in that array. Then we had a look at the implementation by just like mocking out the implementation, checking it's been called with. We looked at basic Jest mock constructors. We then moved on to look at mock return value once, checking how many times it's been called, checking what it's been called with. And then we looked at the implementation. So how can we mock the implementation as opposed to just returning a value? Furthermore, we looked at spying. How can we spy on a function from a module that's been imported? And how can we also use spying to our advantage to return the value back to its original state? Well, we use mock restore in that sense. Next, we basically created another mock function. We called it 3 times. We assigned 3 different pizzas in here, and then we called it 3 times and checked that the last one it returned with was the New York pizza. After that, we had a fixture, a small little fixture that we put together. Basically, it's just an object with the data that we're expecting. So we're saying, okay, the pizza at value index 2 is going to match the object that we have created here. After that, we looked at how we can use async await. So as always, if something is marked as async, it's asynchronous. It's going to, hit the microtask queue. It's going to come back and return a promise. So we have to resolve that promise. So what we did here, we don't want Jest just skipping over and moving on to another test. Well, what we wanted it to do was we wanted to await the return value so we can make sure that expectation is as expected. Likewise, we did that with the reject. So that's quite a lot to take in. Go ahead, create your own data file or maybe your own components. I do recommend React Testing Library if you're using React to put alongside Jest. Very, very useful. But yeah, that's it. There's a ton of more matches that you can use online. Go check out jest.js.io. Check out the documentation. It's very, very useful. The stuff I've shown you today should help you get by. And basically, this should prop you up to 80-90%. The other sort of stuff that even experienced devs do, senior devs, even tech leads who still program in that sense, will also be checking the documentation. So don't feel bad for checking the documentation. Everyone does it on a daily basis. Not everyone can remember every one of these expectations or these assertions, I should say. So yeah, thanks for watching the video. I really hope you learnt a lot, and have a wonderful day. Goodbye.